And okay, Jeff Russo. First season of Fargo was so wildly successful. You got an Emmy nomination from it. Talk about going into season 2. What was the attitude like from everybody involved?
Well, it's funny. One of the things that Noah, the creator, and I talked about was, like, what are we going to do in season 2? Trying to figure out what the music was going to be like. And then he looked at me and he was like, you know what? All new themes. We have all new themes, like nothing from season 1 except for our main theme. Obviously, the main theme that I wrote for season 1 was going to stick into season 2. So I basically started again from scratch. Because so did he. I mean, it was an all new characters, all new story, all new actors, all new everything, except for the geographical location. That's pretty much the only thing that stuck. So I think that the main idea was, let's just try something totally different, something totally new.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, let's talk about that, because this is set like 30 years in the past, I think it is, and it's different in a lot of stylistic ways. Visually, you got all new characters. So talk about writing themes for this.
Well, it was interesting. The first thing I did was I read that first script, and I sort of came to the theme for the family, the Gerhard family, and then started. I actually wrote a theme for Skip Sprang after reading the first script, and it was an important theme for me, I felt, because like he had an importance in the first episode. Now, I hadn't been privy yet to episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6, because at the time they hadn't actually been written yet. But so I wrote this big theme for him, and then he died very early. And when I found that out, I was like, no, what are we? This is a big piece of music. Maybe we don't use it for him. We use it for something else. And in fact, that's what we did. We took that theme, and instead of applying it to him, we applied it to some other things later on in the episodes. And I don't want to spoil too much for people who haven't seen the show yet. Although maybe spoiler alert that he's dead. I don't know. But anyway, so it was like that, and the one thing that I was able to pull across from the first season was this idea of this percussion thing. I did this wrench and numbers theme for season 1, which was just drums. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and Noah also thought, that it would be a good idea to apply that same concept to the second season for some of the bad guys or some of the really high tension moments. So I got the USC drum corps to come into the studio and perform this piece that I'd written, and it was really a lot of fun. So I don't know how I got off onto this tangent of USC, but the whole point was we were trying some new stuff, and when I sat down to write themes based on the script, like some of those themes ended up really working, and then some of those themes were like, oh wait, that can't apply to this person because he's no longer in the show after episode 1. So we kind of had to figure out how to work that out.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to got a feedback here. So let's go back to the beginning, because I remember talking to you, I guess it was 2 years ago, about the first season of Fargo, and you had the influence of the movie and this great score by Carter Burwell kind of like in front of you. You know what I mean? Like just adding a little bit of pressure to live up to that legacy. So
right.
I wonder if you could just talk a bit about the influence of that in, I guess the only part of music, you said the only piece of music that stayed over was the main theme. So can you talk a bit about the influence of that?
Well, it's interesting. We still have to be in the same world in terms of how the score works with the show and what the score sort of means to the narrative. And yeah, in season 1, it was like, I thought I think that really the whole show was sort of living in the shadow of the movie, you know, the score, the show, the characters, the whole thing. And I think as we move past that, you know, there's still that specter, but it's sort of like now we're living in our own shadow. Like the shadow of season 1 is now the shadow that's looming on season 2. So it was interesting in terms of having to write all new themes, but to still sort of stay in that world. And then what could we bring musically that was something new? Now, obviously, all of a sudden we're in 1979, so there's a lot of cool stuff we could do with that, and we did, certainly with the use of songs and also with the use of score. You know, one of the things we talked about was, because we have this German family, that we try to do some things that were a little more German in nature in terms of the score, so a little more angular, a little more angry, but yet while retaining some of that lush feeling of the score from the movie and from season 1. But I would say that we are now more living in the shadow of our first season rather than the shadow of the movie, which I think looms large all the time anyway, because the movie is so iconic and the movie is so fantastic. But I think now that we've sort of walked away from that and have become our own thing, and I think that helps, and then also it sort of makes things more difficult. It's like, well, we feel like we did the best that we could for season 1. Now we're trying to do the best, or we tried to do the best that we could for season 2. You know, it's almost like now we're talking about season 3, and I think, oh my God, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? We felt that same way. We felt that same thing for season 2.
Yeah, I think that's what's so great about, you know, as a fan of the movie and now a fan of the show, you do create your own thing. I think in the ways that you're similar to the movie, and I guess the connecting thread and throughout the seasons as well is in the style and the tone. Yeah. You know, mixing this dark humor with this really bleak violence. I was watching this scene. I don't want to give anything away, but I was rewatching the first episode last night, and there's that moment where Jesse Plemons first comes home, and I laughed. It turned so violent, but there was a moment he said something and I laughed so hard that I had to pause it for a second. So how does that influence the music that you write?
That's an interesting question. You know, I feel like I mean, I'm just influenced by the narrative. I'm influenced by these rich, deep, dark characters, which is why I take so much time in trying to write themes prior to seeing picture, just based on the scripts. You know, the characters are so well written and the stories are so well written that it's almost easy to write music to these really wonderful scripts. And then as I see picture, it starts to even develop even more. You know, as we watch the development of the relationship between the characters grow and become something that they weren't before. Because, you know, I think episodic television is a living, breathing thing. Like, you can have an idea for episode 1 and think how it's going to affect episode 9. And then once you get to episode 7, you're like, oh, yeah, that one thing I was thinking for episode 9, that's never going to work now that the whole thing has become this other thing. And I have to sort of continue to think about that with the score as well, as the score develops over the 10 episodes. You know, we really do sort of pride ourselves on making this feel like one 10-hour movie. That the way I have to approach writing the score is like it's a movie. You know, the whole thing has to develop over time. It's not just, you know, episodic television where it's just totally different in episode 2 than it was in episode 1, and it all has to sort of relate to each other and yet also develop over the course of the entire time. So it's a really sort of intense, microscopic thing that we have to do. You know, we have to look at episode 1 and then look at episode 2, but then think about how episode 1 was. And that entire ethic goes across the entire season. So when I'm in episode 8, I have to think about what happened in 2 and 3 and what I did musically there to sort of inform what I'm doing in episode 8.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It really is more like a 10-hour movie than what used to be episodic television.
Right.
You know, and it feels more cinematic in that way too, you know.
I think that was really the idea at the very beginning of season 1 was, you know, we really want to make it feel like cinema. And I think that more and more people in television are doing that. And I think that that's what's made, people talk about this golden age of television, and I feel like the golden age of television is basically just an extension of cinema into TV.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned how the period 1979 kind of had a little influence on the music. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that more, you know, because I mean, this is the age of disco and all of this.
The interesting part, I tried to incorporate like the way a score might sound then. So I did in the recording techniques and in the sort of compositional techniques that were used then. And then there was also a little bit more of a synthetic instrument injected into the score. Like there are a couple of cues that have this sort of very progressive rock sounding arpeggiated synthesizer. And that comes directly from the fact that we're in 1979 and it was sort of right at the heyday of synthesis being incorporated into popular music. So as the disco era was changing, prog rock was still a big thing from the mid-70s. How that incorporated into music overall and into the sort of general mindset of people listening to music. I think that got incorporated into the score as well in terms of how the time affected the sound of the music.
Mm-hmm. This is a little off topic, but when I was rewatching episode 1, one of my favorite pieces of music is right at the very beginning. You do a parody of this old Ronald Reagan film that's supposed to be based on an event that happened in the past in this town, and I love the way that you took the theme for the show and gave it this lush old Hollywood epic sound. Was that,
you know, well, the funny part about that is that particular scene was scripted from the very, very beginning. And when Noah and I talked about it, he was like, so do we do a theme for the movie in the movie? Because there's 2 movies in the movie. There are 2 Reagan movies in the movie. So there's the one in episode 1, and then there's the one in episode 8 when she is watching TV and then sort of gets pulled into the TV piece. So my idea for the original thing was, as Noah and I were talking about it, I was like, well, instead of doing its own theme, why don't I do an arrangement of the main theme I wrote for the show to sound like it's meant for this movie? Because really the idea was, you know, we open and you see the MGM, the old school MGM logo with the lion, and the idea Noah had was, you want people to think, well, wait, I thought I was watching Fargo. What's this? Like, what is this? Like, this isn't. And then you hear that melody, and it takes a minute for it to sort of sink in, and then you realize, oh, this is Fargo, simply because that melody is playing. And you know, it was a way to sort of draw people in, keep people, and then still have them say, wait, what am I watching? And then go, oh, okay, now I can put 2 and 2 together. It's the show. And that was a lot of fun to record and a lot of fun to arrange. You know, it was like studying those old pieces of music, like seeing how they arranged music back in the 1950s and late 1940s in those kinds of movies, adding certain instruments and taking compositionally how things were sort of orchestrated back then. And it was a lot of fun trying to do that.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the old MGM logo, I waxed nostalgic for a moment. So looking ahead to season 3, I know we've got a long time to wait for it, at least longer than we had to wait for season 2. Can you give us any hint of what we might be able to expect? Or
well, what I would say is, number 1, I'm not sure that you're going to be waiting as long.
Oh, good.
I don't I don't know that for sure, but I have been told that we may air earlier than we did this time. I can tell you that we are going back into the sort of present day. I think it's supposed to be set in 2010. And it's going to be pretty fantastic. That's about all I can say. I mean, I know things that I'm not allowed to say, and then there's a lot of stuff that I just don't know because I'm on a need-to-know only basis, and I don't really need to know yet. But I imagine there will be some absurd violence and some very dark humor. And what I do know is that it will be a smaller cast as opposed to how broad season 2 was. Again, things could change. What I'm telling you right now could be totally different 2 weeks from now. But I've been told that it's going to be a little more smaller character base as opposed to a broader character base like season 2. But all I know is I'm going to start writing the themes momentarily.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. So I wanted to ask you, also this past year, you had work on another limited series, a very different kind of limited series called Tut, which I think I spoke with you about. I think I talked to you when you were writing the music for that.
That's possible. Yes.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about what that experience was like, because it's so totally different from what you did on Fargo.
Well, you know, it was one of those things where we were making this sort of super epic show about King Tut, you know, and I grew up obsessed with King Tut because you know, but when I was young, I was 7 or 8 when they opened the tomb and brought the tomb to I think it was the Museum of Modern Art or the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and I remember going and seeing the thing, and it was just I had an obsession with it. So then I spoke to the director on the show, and we shared this obsession from when we were kids about the show. I mean, about the idea of King Tut. So when going to write the music for it, what I realized is it needed to be this sort of epic score because it was such an epic story, and that was going to be a little bit challenging to do. It's a 6-part miniseries that I had to basically write all at once, but it was like 200 and some odd minutes of music. It was pretty intense. But doing that and then doing that with a 70 or 80 piece orchestra was pretty intense, but we were able to make it happen. And again, it started with themes prior to it, treating it like a 6-part, you know, a 6-hour, or in this particular case, it was set up as 3 2-hour episodes. But just treating it like a 6-hour movie and writing themes at the beginning and sort of how they sort of develop through the entire time of the show based on his life until he dies. And it was a pretty intense undertaking, but I think that we got it.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on all your work from this past year, and I look forward to seeing season 3 of Fargo.
Thank you very much. I will see you very soon.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.